This screencast is going to teach you about air masses, so you're going to use this screencast to complete these guided notes. Alright, let's get started. So, the first thing we're going to need to do is define air masses. So right now on your handout, please define air masses using this definition. Pause the screencast if you need. Alright, so air masses are large bodies of air in the troposphere that have similar pressure, moisture, and temperature. As you can see, they form in different areas and at different temperatures, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them as we go through. Alright? Why are air masses important? Air masses are important because they affect the weather around the country. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do on this worksheet is to fill out these specific types of air masses. So we need to know what continental air masses are: maritime, polar, and tropical. Let's find out. So, continental air masses form over land. See, a continent is land, so when the air forms over it, it doesn't have any moisture to pull up because it's forming over land, so it is dry air. The opposite of continental is maritime. Maritime air masses form over water, so they are wet. Alright, so maritime, if you're a Spanish speaker, you may know that mar means sea. So maritime air masses form over water, so they are wet. Then, polar air masses form near the North Pole, meaning they are cold. Tropical air masses form near the equator, so they are warm. Alright, so at this point you should be able to fill in your worksheet. Continental air masses are dry because they form over land. Make sense? Alright, so you're going to fill out the rest of them. Pause the screencast to do that. Alright, so welcome back. So now I've gone to page 13 of the reference table, and I'm looking down here at the air masses. So as you can see, what they've done on the reference table is they've given you the letters that you combine. C for continental, continental, P for polar, alright, C for continental, T for tropical. Alright, now we're going to talk a little bit more about how putting those two letters together tells us about the air mass. So continental polar, continental means that it's dry air, and polar means that it's cool or cold air, so these air masses are cool and dry. Continental tropical air, continental meaning it forms over the land, tropical meaning it's warm, so this is dry and warm air, right? Maritime polar, maritime is wet, forming over water, but polar means cold, because it's forming closer to the poles, so this is when you have cool, wet air. And then maritime, forming over water. Tropical, warm, means it's going to be warm, moist air, warm air with water. So now, you should be filling into these boxes, right? Continental polar, so continental means it's dry, and polar means that it's cool. Alright, so right now you should be able to fill in the rest of these charts. There is no such thing as maritime Arctic. Arctic is a very special type of screencast, very special type of air mass that is super cold, even colder than polar. So we can do that one together. A continental Arctic would be dry and very cold. Okay? You should fill in the rest now. Pause the screencast and do that. Alright, welcome back. So I want to ask this question. It's important that you know which ones affect us most. New York City is this star that I've drawn right here. So the air masses that affect us most are continental polar air masses that move down from Canada, and maritime tropical air masses that come up from the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. So these two interact and give us all the different types of weather that we experience in New York City. Every once in a while we get a maritime polar coming from the northeast, but generally it's continental polar and maritime tropical affecting us over and over and over again. In the PowerPoint, this slide shows you all the different air masses around the world, so if you're a weather nerd like me or Mark or Joanna or Matt, you know that this is a great place to look and just get some interesting information. You don't need to memorize what all the air masses are. You just need to know what continental and polar and continental and tropical and maritime and tropical and maritime and polar combine to make. All this can be found in the reference table on page 13. So now on the back of your handout, you should be able to label the different air masses of North America. Alright, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different ones, 7 different air masses that affect the United States, and you need to explain which ones affect us. So for example, I showed you this air mass is continental, and, oh, pardon me, the temperature is cold. So because it's forming in the poles, and the humidity is dry because it's forming over land, and so we know that this is a CP, continental polar air mass. Try and fill in the rest of these circles. It's very helpful to use slide number 16. Go ahead and do that now. Alright, so now you should be ready for the last part of the worksheet, part 4 of independent practice. For each weather station below, A, B, C, and D, you're going to use the temperature and the dew point to tell us which type of air mass you would find this sort of weather station. So what we're trying to figure out is the temperature, how is it hot or cold, and then if the dew point is close to the temperature, that means that the air is saturated with water, meaning that you would have humid, wet, or maritime air. And if the temperatures are far apart from the dew point, then that means that the air is dry. So I'll do air mass A right now with you, and then you need to do B, C, and D by yourself. So A, 80 degrees is the temperature, and the dew point is 78 degrees. So that temperature is very hot, which tells me for sure this is a tropical air mass. Alright, and the fact that 78 is just 2 degrees below 80 means that this is very, very close to the dew point, so it's humid, meaning this has a lot of water in it, so it must have formed over the sea, meaning it is a maritime air mass. So the first one would be a MT, maritime, very humid, tropical, very hot. Alright, notice you always write the M or the C before the T or the P, right? The way they're written here on the reference table, C's become before M's, and they're lowercase, and the A, P, or T come after. You need to make sure to do that when you're filling in your answers on your regions or on your milestone. Alright, this should be enough for you to complete this worksheet. Alright, if you have any further questions about air mass, you should ask a teacher, and if you're still stuck, you should make sure to come to office hours. Thanks a lot.